Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who multiply value to others. My name is Mark Cole, and today we're starting a brand new two-part series where John Maxwell is talking about how we can be leaders who overcome instead of being overcome. Now, as John talks about this, he's going to talk about the inside work that we need to do that many times paralyzes us. And next week, he'll come back and talk about the external forces that paralyze us and stops us from being the leader that we should be. I'm so excited because after John's lesson, I'm going to be joined by Traci Morrow, and we're going to discuss what we learned and how we can apply this lesson to our life and to our leadership. Here we go. Here is John Maxwell.
In your life and in my life, we're going to have all kinds of obstacles, barriers, difficulties in our life. I have a minor in counseling, and I used to do 30 hours of counseling a week. And in doing 30 hours of counseling a week, you very quickly begin to see patterns. And one of the things that I realized is that people who give up are usually beat up with what I call the 4 R's. So if you'll allow me in this lesson on overcoming instead of being overcome, I want to talk to you about the 4 R's. I'm going to give them to you now. The first 2 R's basically deal with ourselves, and they're what I call the inside issues of our own life. Number 1 is regret. I run into a lot of people that are filled with regret. Boy, I wish I wouldn't have done this. I wish I would have done this. Oh, I missed that opportunity back there. The second R is resentment. There are an awful lot of people that hold an awful lot of resentment within their lives, and those are both what I call the inside issues. What I mean by that is that if you're going to overcome them, you don't have to look toward anyone else. You're going to have to do that on your own. That's an inside job that has to be handled. Now, the second 2 R's, number 3 and number 4, they come from the outside. The third R is resistance. Whether it's a parent whose children are resisting their values, or a salesperson that the customer is resisting their product, we all come up against a certain amount of resistance in life. And the fourth R is rejection. What happens when whatever we share isn't accepted? Okay. So those are the 4 R's that I want to talk to you about. And if you'll allow me in this overcoming lesson, I'm going to just take them one at a time. Let's talk first of all about regret, okay? And in your notes, Catherine Mansfield said, regret is an appalling waste of energy. You can't build on it. It's only good for wallowing in. You see, regret results into 2 things. And the wallowing that Catherine Mansfield is talking about is the first thing that regret results into, and that is self-pity. When a person is filled with self-pity, very seldom can they accomplish very much in their life. Eugene Peterson is one of my favorite authors. And I'm reading now from his book, Earth and Altar. Pity is one of the noblest emotions available to human beings. Self-pity is possibly the most ignoble. Pity is the capacity to enter into the pain of another in order to do something about it. Self-pity is the incapacity, a crippling emotional disease that severely distorts our perception of reality. Pity discovers the need in others for love and healing, and then fashions speech and action that brings strength. Self-pity reduces the universe to a personal wound that is displayed as proof of significance. Pity is adrenaline for acts of mercy, and self-pity is a narcotic that leaves its addicts wasted and derelict. What happens when we regret is that we have a tendency to feel sorry for ourselves and wallow in self-pity. The second result of regret is guilt. There are many times that because of regret, we feel very guilty. People that have high regret in their life don't have a great grip on what life is all about. When I hear a parent say, boy, if I would have just done better raising my child, and I look at the parent and I say, you don't understand. You're not going to do great raising the child. I didn't do great raising my children. I mean, I did my best. but my best isn't great. You just look back and you just say, wow, I wish I'd have been more patient here. I wish I could have seen it through their eyes on this issue. And what happens is that we get this idea somehow that we can live a perfect life, and so therefore we allow ourselves to regret things that we shouldn't be regretting. Not because we would want to change it or do it better or whatever. It's because that's what life is. And at that moment, that's what we knew. That's all we had. That was our journey of the process of life itself. So our response to our past mistakes must be twofold. Number one, we need to learn from them. The most important lessons I've ever learned were out of my mistakes in life. And number two is we need to let them go. And one is as important as the other. We need to learn from them to grow. Now, hang on. We need to learn from them to grow. We need to let them go so we can continue our journey. So many people, they stop their journey at the depot of regret. And they never continue. They never press on. They never reach their level, only because they keep saying, but I want to go back when we can't, okay? One of my favorite poems that I memorized many years ago. Though we cannot go back and make a brand new start, my friend, anyone can start from now and make a brand new end. The second R is resentment. And the chip on your shoulder can become a very heavy load. You do not have power to stop the negative stuff that can happen to you. We do not have within our own ability to form life in such a way that everything in life treats us very kindly and very fairly. So what I learned was that I had to take control of what I could control. And what I can't control is other people and other situations. What I can control is me. So I can't always control what you will do to me, but I can control how I'll respond to what you do to me. I can't always control how you'll think about a difficult situation, but I can control how I will think about you in that difficult situation. And the moment that I understood that I held within myself the power to control the inside issues, and I want to say something, the inside issues are the important issues of life. Out of it come the essence of life. Let me give you some things resentment does. Number one, resentment hurts us more than it hurts others. Number two, it causes us to focus on the wrong things. It represents a lot of wasted energy, which is number three. It drains us of needed energy. So how do we remove resentment from our life or from the life of someone else? How do we remove resentment? Number one, admit the problem. If you've got that problem in your life, admit it. Number two, add value to those above and below you. One of the greatest ways to overcome resentment is to begin to add value to other people, especially to people that you perhaps are jealous of or resent. If you add value to those above you, that'll take care of the resentment problem. If you add value to those below you, it'll take care of the pride problem. Number three, appreciate your gifts and uniqueness. Appreciate the very fact that you are an original copy. And you're not supposed to be like someone else, and they're not supposed to be like you, and what is success to them may not be success to you. Number four, accept your limitations. Accept the very fact that there are certain things in life that you or I will not be able to do. And number four, ask a friend to help you. Because if you could ask a friend around you to help you, it's awesome, the added value that'll give you.
Are you ready to elevate your leadership to new heights? Join the movement towards High Road Leadership with John C. Maxwell's latest book. In High Road Leadership, John explores the power of valuing all people, doing the right things for the right reasons, and placing others above personal agendas. Learn how to inspire positive change and bring people together in a world that divides. Order now and receive exclusive bonuses, including a keynote on High Road Leadership by John Maxwell himself and a sneak peek into 3 impactful chapters. Take the first step towards becoming a High Road leader. Visit highroadleadershipbook.com to order your copy today.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I just listened to this lesson. I was truly reflecting on how often I allow these internal voices to stop me in my leadership. In fact, I was reminded of Albert Einstein's quote that says, "In the middle of every difficulty, there is an option, there is an opportunity." And I think Albert Einstein is right, that a difficulty can stop you or it can propel you. And so I'm so glad today, Traci, that we're digging into this. I want to overcome. I don't want to be overcame. And so let's go for this, and let's talk about leading through difficulty.
Well, I love any podcast where John is really talking about the true hard work that we do internally, that part of us that really takes a look inside, because we are the hardest person that we're going to lead, right? And so when we have to look at ourselves, we're the only person that we can control. So I love that we get to, as soon as he was like the 4 R's, people who give up are usually beat up by the 4 R's of like, let me at them. What are they? What are they? And so I put up my dukes ready to, I don't want to be beat up by these 4 R's. And so we're going to get to the first two. He gives us all four, but we're going to get to the first two and really dive deeply. And so he hits that those first two are inside issues in our own life. And he starts with the first one, regret, and goes on to resentment. And I found myself quickly going to resentment. And I think it's because from the time I started listening to John, I was 21, and I've learned from him for so long that I quickly passed through regret and got to resentment, because I find that I think I've learned from him enough in most of my adult life that I really learned to not live with a lot of regret. And I found that as a disservice to myself to not slow down and revisit it again. So I had to listen to this one a couple times, Mark. And so I want to slow down and land on regret for a little bit. So is regret or guilt something that you have had to overcome personally or with your team, either regret or guilt?
Yeah, I love this. I was thinking about a meeting that John and I had just a short time ago with truly one of the top technologists, CEO of one of the most respected technology companies in the country. You would know him and the organization if I gave you the name, but he was asked a question in a Q&A that John and he was doing, and he was asked the question, "What's your greatest regret?" And I mean, without even thinking, he says, "I have none." And so it was like, whoa, wait, you have none. He said to have a regret is to not appreciate the journey that's got me where I am today. And I'm right where I need to be, should be, and want to be today. So every setback, every challenge, every bad decision is truly the reason, the infrastructure that created this. I think he was on to something. So when you ask me, do I have a regret? I want to say no. But to be honest with you, Traci, yeah, I've got a couple of things I wish I could go back and do differently. At the same time, I've made major decisions and life decisions and conclusions in my life that led to a totally different life than I planned as a adolescent, as a teenager. But as I go back and I try to take those and I learn from those, I have found that when you use words or emotions or a perspective like regret, what you end up doing is missing the lessons that can be learned to make sure you don't repeat it. I think this is not scientifically proven, but allow me to exercise 35, 40 years of leadership exposure to you. I believe the greatest cause of repeated mistakes is unresolved regret from the first time. I do. I believe people live in it so much that they allow themselves to get too close to the edge and they make the same decision again because they regret it. It's like buying a blue car and all of a sudden there's blue cars everywhere. I think when you spend too much time as a leader on regretting a previous decision, you asphyxiate yourself to that and then become that again. My challenge to all of you, I've seen a lot of leaders come and go. I've seen a lot of leaders cycle back through mistakes. Get peace over the regret that's plaguing you because it's stopping you, hindering you from where you want to go.
I love that you said that. I wrote that down. I hope if you are not driving that you wrote that down too. But if you are driving, quick hit bookmark and come back to that, because the greatest cause of repeated mistakes is unresolved regret. And I think that's why I quickly rushed through that, is because John, if you've been learning from John at for any period of time, I now at 54 started learning from John at 21, 22 years of age. When I look back now and catalog the regrets that I might have in my life, it's because I have learned, it's such a gift from John, is that he taught us and he continues to teach us how to process through mistakes and errors in such a way that we don't look back on those moments with regret. Things that, of course I made mistakes. Of course I've made big mistakes in my life since I was 21. But we have all learned how to process through those mistakes so that they don't become a regret that we look back and cringe a little bit, but we look back and say, but you know what? This is what I learned from that. And that was the gold that I mined from that really ugly moment.
You know, our podcast family knows a lot of my story. I came to Maxwell Leadership. It was a different name, but I came really broken, really busted. I mean, I had so many challenges. And to be honest with you, I had a lot of things to regret. And again, what I found here at Maxwell Leadership was an opportunity to surround myself not with perfect people, because I spent much of my life trying to be perfect because I felt like everybody around me was perfect. And that whole comparison trap, I think that's why John's quote in the lesson today about Eugene Peterson, there is a huge difference in pitying someone else, emotionally relating to someone else, and self-pitying yourself. We have in our organization, Traci, you know this, you're a huge part of this community. We have 51,000 coaches, speakers, and trainers that have joined our team. And what I found in a lot of them is they join because they want a different tomorrow than what they have today. In other words, they're wanting to take the sum of their life today and begin with explosive opportunity and growth in the future. And when we bring these coaches, now 51,000 of them, into Orlando for certification, one of the biggest things we do is teach them Maxwell DNA says yesterday was nothing more than a launching pad for tomorrow. And I'm watching these people, it's as if they've heard it for the first time. They don't have to live in guilt. They don't have to live in self-pity. They can make a difference. Here's what I'd like to do, Traci. We've not done this before, but this is what I want to do. I want to give you an opportunity just to hear a little bit more about joining our community, joining a group of people that don't live in yesterday, but reach for tomorrow. Check this out.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
Thanks for letting me do that, gang. We would love to have you be a part of our community. Traci, I watch you and I watch our team really challenge ourselves to not live in this self-pity concept, to not live in this guilt concept. I think you related to John a little bit earlier. You got through the whole regret thing early on, but then don't we all have to work through this resentment thing? Truly.
Here we land with 2 feet on resentment. And then he talks about the chip on the shoulder and the two kinds of, the things that resentment does. John has this great song. I don't know if any of you have downloaded it, if you even know that John has ventured into writing songs. But you got to look those up and download them, because one of his songs that he has written is one of the songs that just resonates so deeply with me. It's called Get Over Myself. And the song starts out saying, I had to learn how to get out of my way. And this is what resentment really is all about. But he talks about two different things as far as like, do you resent yourself or do you resent other people? And so before we kind of get into resentment and controlling learning to control what you can control instead of pointing fingers at other people. So I've got a two-part question for you in this, Mark. And number one, as a young person, did you tend to lean more and struggle more with internally blaming yourself or with pointing the finger at others and kind of shirking the responsibility and passing the buck, so to speak? And then number two, whichever way you landed on that, how do you now help? Because you can identify now as an adult with whichever one you leaned toward. How do you help people on your team, whether it's in your family or in your team at Maxwell Leadership? How do you help those who are on your team who struggle with the opposite? So let's say you struggled more with blaming yourself. How do you deal with team members or your kids who struggle more with pointing fingers at others, and vice versa if it's the other way?
Boy, I'm so glad. I did not know you were going to ask that question. And I'm so glad you did, because oftentimes we put resentment in the category of disliking or bitterness towards someone else. But yet I found, and so I'm so glad you asked this question, I do more resenting of myself.
Same.
And I definitely lean that way, Traci, to the point to where, I've said stuff like this. Mark, you're so stupid. Mark, what a dummy. And I'm going, hey, I don't even let my best friend call me that. What are you doing, Mark? Calling yourself those names. But it's true, isn't it? We self-talk ourselves into shame, into guilt. And I would dare say, to the point of this lesson today, we talk ourselves right into resenting the very qualities that make us unique, the very things that would give us strengths to become the best version of ourselves. And once again, just like we talked about in regret, I think resentment begins to paralyze us, especially when we're resenting ourselves. You asked the question. I love the second question too. How do I relate to those that kind of point the blame or resent others? I don't understand them, Traci. I don't know if I help them. Because people... And even right now, talking to you about it, I can get on a soapbox and go, how can you put the power of your posture in the hands of someone else? If it's meant to be, it's up to me. That's a great statement, but that's not a colloquialism. That's not a cliche. I truly believe that. I was teaching earlier today, in fact, I was teaching about this concept that says, how do I gain influence with the leaders above me if they won't talk to me? And I went, how are you in a setting to where you do not let your leader talk to you? The responsibility is on the person that wants more from a relationship, not the responsibility on someone that's really fat, dumb, and happy and don't even know that you have a bad relationship. And oftentimes, especially in resentment, we allow other people's lack of focus or lack of action stop us. And I don't know that I help people that have the blame game as it relates to resentment. If somebody is that bad, why don't you be done with them in your thought life and move on? So, Traci, I sound very edgy, very hard on that, because I spend so much, I'm not any better than the person that blames others, because I spend way too much time, as I've already said, resenting myself.
It's a hard parenting thing, isn't it, as well, situation, because when your kids are blaming somebody else instead of taking ownership, if there's ever a moment when they do that. But I also find that my kids are hard on themselves too. So it's behavior that's also taught. We also teach that to our kids. Now, that said, I also find self-deprecating humor to be my humor style. So sometimes if I'm making a joke, I'm not really being hard on myself, but truly, I do tend to be harder on myself. So I can absolutely relate to that. So moving on, John then talks about, And it really all comes down to adding value. When we value people and serve them, that seems to really be the answer to it all. And I love when he put these two things that you can find there in your notes. And I hope you print out your notes, podcast listeners. He says, if you add value to those people above you, it takes care of the resentment problem. And if you add value to the people below you, people moving up in the ranks in your organization or in your company, that'll take care of the pride problem. And so when John talks about adding value and valuing people, it really takes care of you either placing yourself above people or placing yourself below people when you have that perspective shift. I've got another question, but I think it just kind of comes back to teaching our kids, talking about it in our team, really making adding value and valuing people an important part of our team culture. So my last question is go ahead. Did you have something to add to that?
Well,
I'm sure you do.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say this whole idea of adding value to those that you have a tendency to resent. And John says that if you add value to those above you, that you'll take care of the resentment problem. And I totally agree with his point there. I think we have a problem sometimes with resenting other people that have no hierarchical position with us.
Yeah.
Think of family members that's hurt you. Some of us podcast listeners have lost a relationship with a loved one all over something that was done and resentment set in. I can remember a time in my life I had done some terrible, terrible things that I just regretted and again wanted to have the self-pity and wanted to resent myself. And I remember some very important people in my life really not wanting to have anything to do with me. And I spent a while going, well, I don't blame them. I don't want to have anything to do with me either, but I can't get rid of myself. And then I began to relate with how it must feel to have experienced the disappointment. And something happened magical within me. I think it's spiritual, but we'll call it magical for the podcast family. But it was really spiritual for me. Something began to awaken, and I began to have an empathy of how it must feel to be on the other side of me. I had not heard John speak at that time about what's it like to be on the other side of me. And I began a 3-year journey. This is not accolades on me. It's how hard it is to get over resentment once it sets in point. I spent a 3.5-year journey, 4.5 times a week, intentionally adding value to those people that I had hurt, disappointed, and allowed for 6 to 8 months true resentment to set in. And I'm happy to report today that after 3.5, 4 years, really the relationship was not only restored, it was better than ever. But the price tag of allowing unresolved resentment to set in your life, especially with family members, needs to be a convicting point of this lesson today. And resentment can only be, as John has talked about, I love how he started this 2-part series. Resentment is a personal choice. And you can't allow resentment to get into your heart because it will take a root and it will become the fruit of the relationship. And getting rid of that toxic fruit and replacing it with love, joy, peace, a great sense of connection is extremely hard work. So you didn't ask for this on the podcast today, but leaders, listen to me. If you have resentment in your life, you want to get rid of it. And it starts with you on the inside for you to be able to get rid of that. That just teed up perfectly and even began to answer my last question for you, which was, I have found this to be an age or an aging process, a wisdom. Maybe even you could be younger and have just a sincere coachability, teachability to learn this in order to put yourself through that process to really do the deep, hard work. And if I could just speak to our younger listeners, the sooner that you can hold your feet to the fire and really ask yourself those hard questions and be coachable and teachable and listen to what Mark just said. I don't know if you do this with your team members or people who you coach or mentor and are walking through, but how do you help somebody
maybe who has highly competitive pride, or maybe is just so highly hard on themselves, how do you help them go through that or take steps in that, what you took as a 3-year process, Mark? I would say it was a 3 to 5 year process for me as well in my 20s, that I just really put myself on the chopping block to really try to take on a sincere understanding so that I viewed myself properly. It was a spiritual journey for me. But speak to our listeners who are like, maybe they're listening and they have a bitterness and a resentment in them, and they really want to begin the journey of getting rid of that. How would you advise them to close out today?
Yeah, I think it lies in John's final 2 points. I think number one, you need to accept your limitations. And John certainly covered that today in the lesson, because let me tell you something. You cannot overcome by yourself, which is going to lead me to number 5, John's 5th point. But you have to understand that left to your own, you will continue to live a limited life. You cannot. It's the same thing with limitations. Is the same thing as blind spots. You can't see them, therefore they're, quote, blind spots. Limitations are exactly that. They are limiting factors in your life, and you can't overcome them without point number 5, ask a friend to help you. And I think when you can recognize, I'm really struggling with resentment right now. I'm really struggling with challenges. I'm very I really find it easy to devalue myself. And I think that when you and I understand that as a limitation, and we can authentically admit that, vulnerably invite people into that part of your life, then that friend begins to call to your attention negative self-talk, negative self-thinking, negative self-deprecation, so that you are just literally trying to limit yourself from achieving the potential that you want to go after. I think, Traci, I really do believe this, and I'm so thankful for this today. I believe it's a mindset issue. I believe that our ability to turn overwhelm, to turn our doubt and our stress into growth and momentum comes in this ability to stop limiting ourselves. We recently created something. I'm incredibly excited about this. It's the Mindset Mastery Playbook. If you're watching on YouTube, which you should be, then you'll see me holding this up. It's a 4-step process to turn overwhelm, doubt, and stress into growth and momentum. It's what we're talking about here. Don't allow yourself to be overcome. Be an overcomer. And we're going to make this available free. This is a free resource to you. We'll put it in your show notes. You'll be able to see it. You'll be able to download it. You will enjoy this. There's not a hook. We want you to have it. And I think it's a great part to what we're studying today, a great next step. I'll tell you this. When I, years ago, agreed to start this podcast, I realized that it was going to be the daily, weekly, intentional focus that was going to make a difference. You can't do it with one fell swoop. You can't do it with just a quick little pick-me-up. It's going to take every day, every week, working on yourself to change this internal mindset to be that overcomer. I want you to come back next week. We're going to talk about the external factors that limit you to being an overcomer. Hey, I want to recognize one of our listeners from Nigeria. Barbaranti said that I'm watching from Nigeria. I'm multiplying value to others as you add value to me. Well done. That's exactly what we want to hear. We're so proud to have you in the podcast family. And until next week, part 2, go lead well, because everyone deserves to be led well.